You'll never be quite comfortable enough to say, oh, I can leave my job now. But you do get to a point where it's just like, okay, we have savings. Then Seb asked the question, mortgage? Business. And it was like, oh, I don't know. All our friends are getting married, they're having kids, they're buying houses. But I think the thing that we really wanted and what we picked up on is that we really love working with each other. That became the dream, to have our freedom to be able to do these projects together on a full-time basis.
You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the 21 Artist Show. My name is Alexander Richter. I'm the host for today, and I'm here with AJ and Seb. Thank you for being with me today here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, indeed.
Seb is a visual effects artist and AJ is a producer at their own studio, VFX Studio, called Cebiso M in Milton Keynes near London. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you is because you created your own studio, and there's a lot of people out there who are thinking of creating their own studio. And at the same time, it's always this big challenge of like who you work with, how you do that. A lot of people don't want to do it alone. So you are as a couple, for example, you do it together. I think there's a lot of insights of, on one side, how to create a studio, a small studio in the beginning, and also how to do it maybe with someone else. What was the reason that you decided to create your own studio, basically?
I think the studio was kind of a byproduct of what we were doing, because we were already kind of creating doing jobs, like small gigs myself as a freelancer. But then we were hiring so many studios at the time with the work that we were doing, because it was visual effects, and we were having to hire quite a few studios at the time. And AJ just said, it looks like right now you're spending a lot of money on hires. Like, why don't you just formalize this whole thing, turn it into a studio? That's what we did, and we ended up just like looking for a space. I mean, I've shortened the story a little bit. There was a lot more in terms of a lot more friction with the process. I mean, you mentioned like some people being scared of like taking the leap, and I think I was in that position as well, where I was like, I had a job and I was kind of semi-comfortable in the job. I liked the people that I worked with and stuff in my job. But then obviously the prospect of being self-employed, that, AJ kept like feeding in my ear, like, you definitely can, instead of doing this every Sunday and every evening, just like switch it into like a daily thing. And as much as I kept giving her friction, she just took it upon herself to like register the company and, put everything in order and find the space. I'm gonna employ you instead.
So basically, you pushed it, AJ, over the gap of from the idea to basically officially making it real.
I don't know how to come back from that without sounding like a very pushy wife. I think this is the benefit of working together as a couple, because you'll always prioritize trying to elevate one another. There's a lot of self-doubt that any founder goes through when they're going through a process by themselves. So it's always really helpful to have someone who knows you quite well that can also kind of help you go the extra mile. Like, I know you can do this. Like, let's just give you that gentle nudge into the right direction.
I mean, gentle is a very soft word.
It's every night you were like dozing off, and he's like, you know what would be cool? Like at the moment with the vacation thing, every night you're like, vacation. And a few years ago you were like, studio.
I might as well just wear it with pride. I'll wear it as my badge of honor. But yeah, no, he's so talented at what he does, and he has been doing it for such a long time. And I know more than anything that a lot of the time with anything that I'm good at, ever so often I do need that push. So I'll wear it with a badge of honor. I definitely wanted to see you be everything that you can be, and I think you're doing it with this.
Yeah, and just back to her point of saying, having like knowing each other enough to know what the other person can do. I think initially, the reason I was really afraid of freelancing is because I was terrible at chasing things like payments, and really enforcing things with clients to make sure that like I get paid and the clients get their work. I kind of always used to have this feeling that, obviously client is always king and stuff, but when it comes to like when it comes to the finance side of things, and just like it was very uncomfortable for me. I enjoyed doing the work, but I didn't like the admin side of chasing payments and stuff like that. And AJ is very abrupt when she wants to be. Sorry, I'm making
This will be a different discussion when the cameras turn off.
out of approach.
Funny enough, I just recently heard the phrase as the client is always right. It's like used everywhere, and it's like, especially I feel like in the US, it's coming a little bit from that side. And the funny thing is, like, the full sentence is actually the client is always right when it comes to taste. There is like this thing where like you're not, just because you're the client, you're not the king of me. But obviously when it comes to what you exactly want, even if it's ugly or whatever, I will still accept because you're paying me. But it doesn't mean that you're you're a king or whatever to me, basically. Yeah. When it comes to the tweaking of the color or whatever, that is where the client is the king, basically. But I think when it comes to this, all the like how they treat you and the whole process is, that is something where I think we need to adjust this quote a little bit to like it's actually not just taste that they're right.
Yeah, it definitely had something to do with me understanding my worth. I think she had a very strong impression on helping me understand that sometimes having to try and deal with one particular client could take away from you having to deal with someone new and stuff like that. Like, and I think I just learned that from her, that, if it's more about, you're not happy with the client that you're with, like you're giving them great work. It's like one side of the coin, but then on the other end, there's kind of very little appreciation. I used to be terrified about that confrontation. But I think just having someone there that knew how to talk to the clients and explain to the clients that, no, it's not that, we're stubborn or we don't want to stop the work. It's just that we need a specific deposit for us to run this. If this job is going to last 2 months, we're going to need X amount of a deposit for it so that we can get the job done. We don't get any delays and stuff like that. And I used to have a hard time explaining some of those things, although there were realities when it came to doing the work. So I think I kind of was afraid of getting into that freelance, into that like business place and independence space just because of that. But in the end, I mean,
I think it's also one of those things where when you come from any sort of migrant working, where you're like based in one country and you move over to another country, everything is brand new. You're not 100% sure of some of the nuances that sort of happen within industry.
Taxes, for example, also.
And all of those sorts of things. And in that, it's like you're trying to learn a new culture, a new country, new people, and all of those sorts of things. So it can sometimes be quite compromising because you become overly compensating for some of those things. So I think I further to my defense, because I think that was just one of those things that you needed additional support with.
But I think that's also one of the elements that you describe. I think is the most common thing, is like, why should I go through the pain of everything that is not actually the things that I enjoy? Like, doing the art, working on something, because it will take away so much time and effort just to keep everything together, all the finances, timelines, and so, which normally is done by the CTO and whoever, and CFO and producers and all the others. And obviously, you lose freedom, you lose part of the cake. You just get your salary and stuff like that. And I think that is also one of the things that I really like not to open especially a studio by yourself. I think it's always good to find this thing, and you describe the best way kind of to separate between one is particularly just more on the artist side and one is more on the production side, where you can split it. And even if they have an overlap and maybe both do art, and so it's still good if one is just like more passionate and interested and also maybe able and kind of like, okay, I will do the tax things, or I will do the calling people up and writing emails things, not because particularly I enjoy it, but it's like I'm not afraid of it as much, or because there is something like even in art would be like there's people who are afraid of it, like being your own artist or being your own like visual effects studio. It's like, can I deliver the whole thing? Because now I maybe have to hire people or I have to do it myself, but can I deliver? Like we just talked about the last project, the current project that you're doing, like with all the details that you want to do, there's like maybe some simulation in there and shading and whatnot. And it's like, can I do that? Like if you are just two and you're mainly the artist, like, can I do that myself? Can I compensate? Same thing for you is like, can I like understand the British kind of environment and how to register everything and communicate, how to write an invoice correctly without like all the...
When we started the studio, I think we didn't necessarily go out of our way to say, all right, let's start a studio. And we had no kind of need for it. I think the way that we even accumulated some of the equipment is because a need came, be it like it's a project that had a need where, for example, the studio itself was because we were hiring too many studios and we thought, okay, I think it's probably better for us to get a studio. We might have to pay just a little bit more, but the difference is kind of negligible considering how many times we're having to hire spaces. And then even when it came to the cameras, people would come and they'll be like, okay, do you guys have cameras that we can hire, stuff like that? And then just because that need came up and we kind of purchase cameras, and then next thing you know, we're purchasing motion tracking suites, for purchasing photogrammetry equipment and stuff like that. So I think it was mainly very much inspired by, okay, what's the current need? And because those needs were kind of arising organically, it means that we didn't necessarily lose track of how the studio itself worked. It's literally still just the two of us that are permanently employed. And when situations arise, like you're mentioning, where we are not too sure about a project, like, well, not too sure, because anything is possible with VFX, but you kind of know that you need someone who's a specialist in a specific field, like particle simulations or something like that. You know exactly the right person to... I have the understanding of that stuff as a VFX artist, but I also have the understanding that there's someone better than me somewhere out there, and that person will come and add a lot more value to the project that I'll be working on. But because now it's under a studio, it adds a lot more weight to it as well, to the space, because we kind of know how to create and direct what we want to come out of the project. And then mainly, I would creative lead. AJ sometimes will write the scripts for some of the work that we do. And we kind of just push and pull, the both of us. And when we need an additional hand, for depending on the scale of the project, we can like onboard people and also, offboard people as time goes. And it's kind of been our system so far, and that's kept us very flexible. It's kept us getting the right talent at the right time, because we don't want to commit to lock ourselves to talent. It's almost like me locking myself to myself. I've got limitations, and if a project came in and I was an employee, I'll probably be forced to churn out particle simulations, and then that's how you get subpar work, And I think that kind of has worked for us. It's worked for our costing, because we're not overpricing just to try and, just to pay people that we've like onboarded. We kind of do it the other way around, where we say, okay, the value of the project is X, then we onboard people to work on that project, and then we offboard people. Everyone's happy, everyone comes out of it with the portfolio. And I think that's definitely something that's worked.
How would you describe like the transition basically from doing kind of random freelance work on the side, like you two basically, to really going into the studio? Because there is often this kind of imagination of like, and now I woke up and suddenly I had a studio registered and room, and obviously I have to do a few things to like, set it in motion for a few weeks, but it's now like, it was just from one day to the next, it was like that. How would you describe the transition from like, kind of freelance work to becoming like a studio, a company, basically? What was the path? Would you say it was pretty abrupt, like from one day more or less to another, or was it a long stretch and it's kind of like step by step? Because I feel like that's often people like are not sure, how should I do it? Should I quit my job and just jump into it tomorrow, or should I do it like slowly on the side on the weekends after hours and stuff like that? How did you do it basically?
It was a mixture. So Seb moved to the UK. And then it was a case of starting again. I mean, you move to another country, you have to face the prospect of, okay, am I going to have to start again? And it was just unfortunate that the sorts of jobs that were being made available to you were not necessarily at the same level. So the frustration there, or the need there, is that we want to earn more. So we just opened up to freelance work over weekends. It essentially meant that we sacrificed our weekends. So rather than, doing the nicer things, going on holidays and, all of that type of stuff, we slowly started to acquire equipment to try and make up for that gap that we knew that he was capable.
You didn't have holidays since you founded basically the studio.
Never had.
That's, by the way, if you're interested in founding, the first thing you should do is probably, while you're employed, go on your 6 months holiday or something, and then you can just start
It's going to be doable. I mean, we haven't for 5 years now.
Yeah, no, we haven't been on.
Yeah. So essentially, it started from that need that the skill level versus the current remuneration, there's that gap, but we can fill it. And we've never been work shy. So we spent a lot of weekends kind of finding work and trying to fulfill it. So it kind of meant that there was this spillover between your 9 to 5 and then also working the extra for other projects. So probably 7 p.m. until midnight, you're doing that additional work. Then essentially from there, you're working towards a point where there is enough of a client base or enough of a demand that you start to kind of do this. You'll never be quite comfortable enough to say, oh, I can leave my job now. But you do get to a point where it's just okay, we have savings. Then Seb asked the question, mortgage? Business. And it was I don't know. All our friends are getting married, they're having kids, they're buying houses. But I think the thing that we really wanted and what we picked up on is that we really love working with each other. That became the dream, to have our freedom to be able to do these projects together on a full-time basis. Then the idea of the studio came along. And I just started browsing. It was a very casual sort of, oh, that's nice. Oh, that would be great, knowing that we had some savings. And then the perfect space just showed up. It was you specifically said, wouldn't it be great if we had somewhere on a nice farm and stuff? And then this place just showed up. We were the first people here, so we got a pick of the different spaces. And then from there, we were should we put down the deposit? Yeah, let's do it. And we did it. And then that's when COVID hit.
Oh yeah. The big one that changes always everyone's.
Curveball.
I mean, at least you were not planning to open a restaurant at that time. That was
It kind of shows you the unpredictability though of any situation.
even just a few months ago, actor strike. If that would be a moment where you started to deposit and things and buy, and then the moment you need slowly to get income, suddenly bush.
COVID hit, and then we get furloughed. So furlough essentially being your company's still paying you for work, but they just have you on hold because obviously everyone still had to pay bills and everything. So we used that time to build the space. And it kind of went over a little bit because we kind of went back to work, but we were still managing to kind of go and do our 9 to 5s, but then come home, sleep for 2 hours, and then show up here at 7 p.m. and work until 4 a.m. in the morning. Multiple times, either one of us would be oh my God, I was falling asleep at my desk. It is one of those things that a lot of people would say that's kind of toxic work culture, where you're working round the clock. But then this came from a place of passion. As to your question of, was it quite a quick thing or was it quite abrupt? It was something that was slowly in the making. So when we got there, it was still a bit of a surprise. Holy crap, we actually did it. Yeah. We actually decided that we were going to get a space. And then again, that thing of you're never quite comfortable got to a point where we're now paying for this space, but we're still in our jobs. So now we're making money at work, but then we're paying for this place. So there's nothing. Everything is at an equilibrium. There's no benefit at this point. And then that's when you realize, okay, we're going to have something has to give.
Gotta let go of one of the things.
So basically you kind of waited also to the point where you feel the business is maybe not yet at like zero, where you zero out every expense and whatever, and you're also private expenses, but you are feeling it's touching the ceiling of that. If you would put more energy in, or like it sees the ceiling from afar.
It's when clients start saying, when you have to start turning down work.
You could feel if you would put the extra time, there would be
You
the.
never quite know, because you can't say, oh, yeah, definitely fine.
Because often if you actually put then and suddenly like no one's showing up. But it's basically what you would say is like you waited till at least to have 50% kind of production plus scale, where you felt like it was running as you as people were already known for some clients. You had maybe some regulars, and then you build something where you can like present as a studio in itself. Even then, you kind of waited until you felt there was like, okay, we already have something, and if we give the extra time, there's potential, not guaranteed, but there's potential to become this as our full-time job base.
It felt like you would lose either way. Like if you left your job, then you're going to lose out on the income that you've been getting, which is a large chunk of money that you had coming in. Yeah. That's just not there anymore. Or you lose your dream, like the stuff that you've been putting so much effort, sweat. Like we built our entire space ourselves, and there was just that fear of like, okay, do we just stop this? Because we were paying for the space itself, but we weren't necessarily generating any income for the space. We were just taking our salary, putting it into the space. So the potential was hypothetical, okay, if we did leave, then we can now start to chase more work, or we can now start to do other things.
And what helped was having to every so often a client says, oh, are you guys going to be available on the Monday?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, do I take leave?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I randomly catch COVID? Please cut that bit out.
I mean, you're now independent. Now it's like
we've all done it. We've all done it at some point. That's where it was like, okay, decisions have to be made.
Yeah.
And even then, once we got the space and we were now starting to get clients, the realization was that our business has changed, our offering has changed, because previously we would do visual effects mostly, but then now we're having to market differently, because we now have a space in which we would have agencies hiring us to come into spaces and all of that type of stuff. But then now we needed to change our model and our sell, because now we actually have a space where we can do all this R&D and
exactly.
Be more experimental and have a bit more fun with the work.
If you would think back of like how you started, just like what would be the thing that you would say like, that's something I would do differently, either be earlier in the race or take longer or prepare something else? I mean, something like COVID you cannot predict. That's something, that's something you cannot change. But is there something that you would say like, hey, if I would advise someone else to found a studio also with another person, that is something that I believe would be better that we learn from if we would do a studio part 2. Basically, that's what we would do basically.
I'm trying to think like.
Yeah, I think like, because from the very beginning, like having someone to kind of carry the weight. I think one thing as a creative is when things are hard, they're really hard, especially if you're by yourself. And like when there's nothing coming in and there's no one doing the regular job in the house to keep, the pace moving up until, your client base picks up, it can get very hard. And I think like that's like the one thing. I'm starting the opposite way. That's the one thing I wouldn't change. Like just the having the support. I think when things are very dry, you just know that like there's someone that's gonna kind of keep things going. And I'll be honest and say like it's never really like smooth sailing all the time. Like the people that are around you will be 100% like they'll support you out of love. And I think it was kind of like that in the beginning, where like there's because there's the love. Okay, I love this guy. He's trying.
That's what your clients say to you, basically.
Yeah,
I love this guy. He's trying his best. I stick a little bit longer because the love is there. Okay.
Exactly what the clients say as well. That's the one thing I wouldn't change. Just like having that person. I think it doesn't necessarily even need to be a partner. It could be like your brother, or it could be a family member, or like a close friend that that has the understanding, and obviously you have to really try as well in order for that synergy to work. Like, okay, going out of your way to try and make things work. But I'd say if there was something we could do differently is, strangely enough, getting the space. I feel like, yeah, I know it sounds like a paradox. It sounds like a paradox, but I feel like...
So we need now like a explanation video of like 10 minutes to explain whatever that was. Just what do you mean?
I would say getting the space, like, because I think in the beginning it made things more difficult because we had this permanent outgoing that we had that was just there, whether or not you're on a 5-year lease. In some way, it's the motivating thing that's like, okay, we need to make sure some money comes in so that we can pay rent, for the studio and pay rent for the home, and But I think if we had done a lot more like client development before we actually got the space, we wouldn't have had that outgoing nightmare kind of fuel in the beginning. But at the same time, the clients that we had meetings with that we brought to the studio kind of committed because of the studio. So it's like a chicken and egg kind of situation where it was like, it took a while for clients to trust us, to be like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. We can trust them.
One of the reasons was the space.
Exactly. The reason was the space. So it was so difficult. Obviously, you don't show that to the client, like when they're like in the early stages, and you don't say like, oh no, this is challenging and whatnot. You kind of just...
You have to put on a
facade to kind of make it feel like, the studio.
That's the biggest client in the world. Like, we worked on...
But I think at the time, like, it was very difficult. I feel like that's the one thing that like made things very challenging in the beginning, because we had a persistent outgoing that we had to meet. In the same way, it was kind of motivating because you had to get things done. But at the same time, I feel like it made things, like, it put us in a very tight spot. And I think... I feel like that's the one thing that I would have said. Maybe I'll leave work. I don't know if I would have left work if we hadn't had the studio.
I don't think it has to hurt. If it's not hurting, you're probably not doing it right. But the crazy thing is also when you're not doing it right, it also still hurts. So it becomes really difficult. But then I think that's where it's so interesting, because we had instances where people saw what we were doing and we had investors approaching us like, oh, okay, so what is it that you guys are trying to do and all of that type of stuff. Because what we were doing was very much coming from our own lived experience. We didn't do the whole sit down and write a business proposal of, oh, well, in the first year, our turnover is going to look like this and the trajectory of the business is X, Y, and Z. But those are just things that we did not do because we were going off of our own lived experience. Okay, what clients do we have? And, how frequently are they coming back? And all of that was just stuff that we didn't have on paper. It was just up here, And we kind of just needed to follow our gut instinct. And it's so difficult to try and advise anyone else on what their journey is, because I think we have had people that we really looked up to, and when they try and impart wisdom and like, this is the path to doing what you need to do. It always so varies according to the person. Everything that we did was because we were once at risk of not even being able to be together in the same country, and, at the risk of not being able to provide for our families because of the pay discrepancies and all of that type of stuff. And it's just this itch that we had of like, but we have the skill set and we have the talent, but we're not progressing as quickly as we would want to. And then trying to make our own way of like, a little bit of delusion helped. A little bit of delusion, a little bit of stubbornness. But for me personally, I don't think I'd change anything about the journey. There were fights that were had, there were disagreements, there were tears, there were everything. But then for what we have now, it's just like, my goodness, like I don't think you can ever sort of sit down and plan for things like this. Sometimes things just fall into place and you need to embrace that journey.
Sure, there's some
As opposed-
genius out there that can plan and have that amount of
Something
foresight.
like that.
I mean, even if you have this, I mean, like for example, Elon Musk described founding a studio as eating glass and looking into the void, basically, where it's just painful and you are not like constantly like not sure where you're actually looking at and where you're going. And he's the richest man in the world. So now we're having like 5-6 companies under his belt. I think that is the misconception that I see most of the time. And it includes in every situation I've ever seen, including creating art, learning. It's always this, oh, I know the path. I know what to do. This is the perfect way. If I do it this way, this will. Yes, you can have it like if you're experienced, you can find this for yourself. But there is this experience of painfully like failing. And then you maybe find the path that really works. You know that maybe, for example, to learn like Python or visual effects or Houdini or whatever, you do it this way. You need a mentor. You need videos. You need this. You need that. Great, but the pain to get there was always there. But if you would be starting and someone says, "Oh, this is the way. This will be 100%," it will never work. And it's same thing. Like, yeah, you can have a business plan, and maybe it helps because it puts things, but also it takes time to create this, understanding. Sometimes there is an unclarity of vision, but also the unclarity of vision makes it exciting. And at the same time, like, you know, if you don't have this, then maybe you will postpone it forever because I don't have a business plan. I don't have the 100% clarity in that. So let's wait until all the pieces are together, and then 5 years later, you're still not somewhere. There is a little bit of madness going on to that. And I think every change, and I mean that including learning and business creation, involves pain, because change means you fail. Because if it's not new, you will not fail. That's like a normal thing. And if it's new, you will fail. If you learn something new, you will do mistakes until it works. If you create a business, you will do mistakes until it works. So I think it's always just this, yeah, but the reward is bigger than the pain in between. And obviously you are trying to adjust to remove the pain and to make it more worthwhile. But at the end of the day, if you arrive where you are and the pain was reasonable, basically, you're like, yeah, okay, it was not fun, but and again, like I remember, like what was it at the film academy? We always said, like, I would always do it, but I will not do it again. In terms of the business, AJ, like because you are not from the visual effects environment, you just mentioned business plan, and also we talked about, for example, investors and things like that. What did you like see as coming a little bit from the outside, and maybe also not being like able to do the actual paid work, but all the things that surrounded the whole studio, basically, and at the same time, like thinking about investors and business plan and all this stuff. Where do you kind of like felt like that was something where it was better to be an outsider sometimes, not being too, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm in this business and I just want to create art and whatever. And at the same time, do you feel it was the correct choice to stay like everything on your side, you both side, or you still think maybe also it would be good to get investors in, but also give away like, you know, participation and stuff like that?
I'm glad that the idea of investors was something that we once looked into, but we very quickly sobered up and said, actually, I don't think.
They have too much requirements.
There was so much like self-investment in this for us to be able to sort of share that vision with anyone else, or for anyone else to sort of come in and have a steer on how it is that we do things. There came a point where we were getting so much pushback and questioning. And sometimes it's the thing that molds you, you know, when someone is giving you a
you need sometimes the hard questions that you avoid a little bit.
You sometimes need that. But if you find yourself being so stubborn about your vision and having the balls to say, no, I'm still going to do it my way, there's something quite fulfilling. There's something quite fulfilling.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know, it did mean that we really did insist on going at it alone. And as much as I think bringing other people in would have been helpful for us, like we would have had a bit of respite, but then it's then questioning in the long term, is it going to pay off? So you bite the bullet and you're like, we're just going to go at it. And then as far as my contributions, I mean, I accepted that I was leaving my industry. I come from like a theater sort of background, and it was trying to reshape my skill sets and then make them marry into what Seb was doing. But I think first and foremost was just my role as a partner. So seeing him and his capabilities and what he can do, and then never quite getting the opportunities to showcase that was a great sense of advocacy for me, to be like, okay, what can I do? Well, I'm quite good at like sending a good email, or I'm quite happy to network with people, things that he doesn't like doing. So it's just kind of trying to figure out where we make up for each other's shortcomings, because we're already naturally doing that in our relationship. And we actually met on the basis of working together. Like the first time we met, we worked on a documentary together. Please don't go out there and try and find it. No one wants to see that. But it was about like storytelling and stuff like that. But we kind of caught on that before there was even a relationship, there was this really cool kind of dynamic sort of give and take in terms of like our work when we're putting a project together. So that was the foundation of the relationship. So it kind of made everything else come so naturally. And also just we had a long distance relationship for like 6 years, where we were apart and we weren't quite knowing at what point would we be able to be in the same country. So I feel like as of us getting the opportunity to give it our all, we just went nuts. We just really sunk our teeth into it.
I'll add on to that as well and say, like, sometimes when people are, I'm not judging people's relationships, but say you're someone who wants to build a studio and you're in a relationship with someone in the same field as you, the conversations that happen in that space are not limited to just like the romantic side of things, like the I love yous or whatnot. Like when stuff is going wrong, you kind of still have to talk to each other because you have business together and you kind of are both in the same you're in the like creative field, and sometimes we still have to continue to problem solve together. And just like that, like, you know, the conversations are flowing again and stuff like that. And I think that aspect has been an underrated side of the glue. That's kind of the fact that when we started, we were working together and we just worked so well together. And it's literally just been that since then, where there's like just something that she's involved in that I'm doing, or I'm involved in something that she's doing, whether it's like for some of her theater stuff and then would have to create some of the posters or whatever, you know. It's just like there's always that trade of like she's giving something, you know, and then I'm like contributing with what I can. And that's kind of even up until now been like a very good anchor for us and like a very good compass to be like, okay, we know where we want this studio to be. And I think that added to the stubbornness as well. Like when you have the vision of like, this is what we want to do. And even if someone comes in and says, well, you're not going to be able to do it because of X, Y, Z, because, you know, but then because we kind of have that shared vision and we've had those shared assists, it just makes it a lot more easy to kind of get through it.
Time and time again, the relationship has had opportunities for us to fulfill a common goal.
Yeah.
And with each time that we manage to do something that we set our minds to, it just further reinforces the fact that, okay, if we put our minds to doing something, we're going to be able to do it. And I know I can't do it without you. You know you can't do it without me. And then it's just pouring. And it's interesting because I have friends that are dating, and I hate to go to this side of things where it's like speculation about just the dating world and stuff. But I do think that there's a level of trust that you just have to, it's like you're saying to someone, here is everything that I want to build, my hopes, my dreams, my everything. And I am handing this over to you and entrusting you to not screw me over, essentially. And I think we kind of learned that way back in our relationship when we first got together. I kind of feel like we're moving away from VFX and into like some love.
Hey, it's how we built the studio. It's part of the journey. Yeah. That's the story.
That was my fault.
Yeah. I mean, If you want to find out how, who's the guy you mentioned who's got 4 studios? If you want to find out how he
Elon
built his
Musk?
studio, he's probably got his own stories, you know, about what sacrifices he made. But I do think the cheesy love has been kind of the reason why this has worked in terms of us. I don't necessarily think there's some kind of genius plan or something. I just think it's just because we were just stubborn about the vision, and we both had the same vision, and we just.
And you're also like different people. I think there is a problem. There would be a problem if you would do the same. Like you would both be visual effects artists, or you both be like accountants or whatever, you know, and maybe with enough skill to pull it off visually, but you are more on the side of this kind of. So I think there is this in relationships, but also in founding a studio or a company or whatever, it is good if you have the one person doing the boring stuff, the one person doing the cool and creative childlike stuff where you go all out, and they both kind of, you know, defend each other, because like one like gives you the space to play around, you know, do the extra thing, and the other one gives you the results that you need to deliver basically to the client, so you don't have the stress there, like, you know, constant like, sorry, we're not finished yet.
Don't forget, I mean, we were once upon a time in the age of just family-run businesses. I don't know, the 1800s or whatever, where a father would teach their kid, like, this is how you become an ironsmith, and then families would so naturally support the family business. But I kind of feel like we came out of that, and then post-COVID, more and more people are starting their own businesses. I just think that there's something so underrated and special about working within the family, because there's the common goal of this is beyond just me.
Yeah.
This is for my child, my sister, my parents, or whoever. Like being able to have people within that network.
Yeah. And in a way, it's kind of like the most primitive state of being, because most of the time when we go to work, we kind of go to work so that we provide, and then, you know, we eat, we travel, we have our guilty pleasures. I think like if you look back at like families and how they were handling, like there was a family that was known to make shoes, and it was like the cobblers, and, you know, even everyone there is kind of contributing to how the shoes are made and all that. And there's a family that's very good at like farming and food and stuff like that. Some people are blacksmiths and stuff like that. And I think it's kind of like the basis of like the family having something to give to the world. And I think that for us, that kind of just became
an amazing thing to aspire.
Yeah,
to.
like to just have something to trade. Obviously, right now we're trading money because money is kind of the medium. But
I mean, that's what studios try to kind of do. They're like, we are a family here. Like, you know, if you think about the recent culture of we are a big family. If you join us, you will be part of that. And then I think there is a little bit maybe subconscious or something thing of like bringing back this old trade. But obviously this is like corporate now, but we're still like having the same structure, the same feeling and the same idea, because I think internally we are like, we want to work with the trust that is far above the contract. And I think that there is why a lot of companies do it, but it's often superficial. Like it's often is when it comes to, you know, like rubber to the road, then it ends up being like, yep, letting you go. Like, you know, we don't need as many people.
So I saw a post recently, like of a company, I don't know which tech company it was. They were hiring for a role for like a CG artist. I mean, I know like what those roles are worth and stuff, but they wanted to pay like a ridiculous fee for it. Obviously, you'll have multiple people applying for that. And I was wondering, like, how sustainable is that? And I think that's kind of how you end up having people leave their roles to chase. Someone leaves their role where they're earning moderately okay. They see this amazing opportunity. They get given the job. The company achieves its goal with you as a CG artist. They get their product out or whatever it is, and then they start to look at the numbers, like who's getting paid a lot of money, and then they start to like boot people because they kind of haven't. They really kind of want to onboard people just so they can attract the best talent for a short period of time, pretend like it's a long period of time.
For example, like a studio, a visual effects studio, it's basically the same thing. It goes in waves a little bit, but it's always the same work, more or less, the same thing, the same studio, the same everything. But they still have this project-based thing. and some of them still say like, oh, we're still a family here, even though you will be gone in like 3 months, or half of you will be gone in 3 months. So I think there is something very natural and primal about like having very closeness to someone, family, very close friends, or something like that. So I think that is like a really interesting point that I can see like studios tapping into, but not really getting across the finish line, basically.
I think that's how we kind of tapped into it ourselves, just like, just doing it.
Take the lead.
Yeah, just taking the leap.
And I mean, just post-COVID in general, everyone is reassessing how work works. Now more than ever, people have a realization and an appreciation for the fact that life still happens, and this idea of coming into a workspace and trying to act like you didn't sleep last night because your kid was like screaming the whole night, that, other family problems are not happening and things like that. I just think it's one of those things where people are now suddenly so conscious of that work-life balance.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like I do think that like once you're now on the side of the person that has to pay whoever you're on board, it's no longer that like rosy, because you're now thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to pay this person. I need that time to be maxed out or whatnot, or I just need the result. I need the result to be there. Maybe I don't care how they do it, as long as I know that, okay, I've got this result at Excel. But I think because I'm a creative, and I'm the type of creative that I can have a block where it's like I come across a problem, and then I just tell myself, I think maybe I can't move on until I like try and solve whatever that problem is. Then you end up spending a lot of time just trying to solve something very small and stuff. And I think once you now think of it from like an employer's perspective, you're kind of thinking of it as time and thinking of it as like money. Yes, you'll be saying, we're
family.
I think that's what helps with our approach as well, because we're kind of not blocking ourselves to that. It's kind of like someone wants the role, they say, I can deliver this thing in X amount of time. We just want you to rotoscope, or we just want you to do this. And it's a very specific thing that they're coming in for, and then then they're done with it and they deliver it within whatever result deadline they said they could. So it kind of doesn't matter what time they do it, whether they're like a night owl kind of person or, or they do it during the day. And I do think that's a kind of more sustainable way for studios to kind of deliver work, unless they have like the demand, obviously, and the capacity to like just onboard as many people as possible. But the idea of being onboarded because there's one project happening and then people get offloaded on the other side of the project being complete, like I feel like that's kind of, some people leave other jobs, they think they feel like they're comfortable, but then it's literally a chess move, just like make an attractive offer, people jump on it, you get the best talent, you finish your project, like, yeah, cheers, thanks. If you're thinking about it as like,
sorry, are you continuing?
In one go.
Sure.
At the end of the day, the main point was like, the interesting point was this kind of like, you as a couple, you as a family doing it, still very small, obviously, but still also the difference in how it feels like and how you approach it. And I think the part that I want to also get back, because obviously not every founder will be married to each other and stuff like that, but it's still what I'm interested also, just understanding the part that adds to being connected to each other, not just literally business. It can be friends, good friends. I mean, usually it's the thing that like you will not found something that with a stranger or something. What I like about this is this approach of family that to some degree can transition into someone being very close to each other, and having this approach is like, yeah, we business partner, but we still should approach it from this like emotional or trusting side as well, where we came in as good friends, as people that enjoyed working together, as people who trust each other, as you said, like kind of like, now becoming vulnerable to, someone literally could sabotage or take away all the shares, like the Facebook style, social network kind of.
It could still happen.
Episode 2, like, you know.
Marriage counseling. Yeah, no, but then this is the thing. We confront that.
Welcome to our short mid-episode coffee break. If you love the content and would like to have a successful career in the film or games industry yourself, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find helpful articles, masterclasses, and coaching opportunities that help dozens of my students to bring their profession to the next level. That's all. Check out 21artistshow.com and share the podcast with cool people you know. Let's continue with the episode. It would be like also my questions, like how would you say is the key part that, in terms of the business, where you say that's why it works between you two? Is like where I would transition that also to people who are interested. Like, hey, if I would found that, how can I make it work with a good friend that I like to work with? What would you say is the elements that keep these things together and like enhance it by, like, you know, create the trust, create the solutions, and it's not constantly like two opinions like confronted all the time and stuff like that. What would you say is the elements that make it work for you as a couple also, basically?
I think it was a time thing, because it started off not necessarily from a massive project. We started off with a small documentary that we made. That was the first sort of glimpse into understanding how the other person works and everything else. And then, as you would naturally in any relationship, you just kind of continue to grow from there. You start to see, you know, other aspects of the person, whether it's their strengths, their weaknesses. And then you start to take all of those various things into account. Because in a relationship in general, I would imagine, or at least my vision of what I want my relationship to be would be to just be with someone that understands that some days I'm not my best self. And for them to be forgiving of that, and for them to be understanding of that, and then furthermore be willing to actually fill in my shoes for that day or that week or that month, was just really helpful from a relationship perspective. So for us, it wasn't too far stretch from an idea. It wasn't stretching the mind at all to then have that fall into business and how we earn, because we love spending time with each other. We love bouncing ideas off of each other and setting a goal, and then like, oh, do you think we can do something like that? Yeah, let's try and do it together and see what happens.
Yeah, to make it applicable to people that are, let's say, just friends or something, or partners that are like thinking of starting a studio. You will disagree. And I think disagreements happen everywhere, whether you're employed or, you know, oh, it's your sibling. You'll just disagree all the time. As long as you know the intention of your sibling, so you know that, like, it's not like your sibling is disagreeing with you because they want to kill you. Maybe they do, but like they
keep
won't.
inside.
Yeah, keep it inside.
I remember when I was 5, the one thing that you did.
You did. Yeah, exactly. I think the intention is like really the key driving factor of what happens next. Because if it's more like the intention is, yes, to steal the shares and whatnot, then that's when you'll be uncomfortable with every decision you make, because you're worried about what is the intention here? Was there a hidden agenda here? But I think we disagree all the time, like about like different projects, execution or whatnot. Obviously, she has to, like, she's the one who's the business development lead, so she has to stomp her foot down and say, actually, we're going to do it like this. When it's a creative decision that she doesn't like, I put my foot down and I'm like, I know you don't like it, but I like it. So let's go. Yeah, that's what
we have the budget for, then we do it.
Exactly. We're doing it anyway. Those disagreements happen, and it's just more thinking about, am I disagreeing because I'm trying to kill the company, or am I disagreeing because of, like, what's the intention behind that disagreement? And the intention is always, we're all trying to do the best thing for we're all trying to do the best thing for the studio. I believe what I'm doing is the best thing for the studio. Luckily, at this point, I have the power as creative lead to agree. And I think the important thing is having those powers. Like, not you being on a stalemate where
it should not be 100% democracy in every question.
Exactly. There should be a power that one person has, depending on the strengths, because you know each other, right? Depending on the strengths, if AJ says this email needs to be abrupt, or this email needs to be like this. And I'm like, I don't think it should be like that. And she's like, no, it does. And then she sends it. I disagree. She sends it. And the effect is positive. Doing damage control.
Yeah.
What would ChatGPT say to that one?
Or the other way around, you know, where she stomps her foot down, it comes back, it's positive, and like, all right, okay, yeah, you did, but it was her call, it was her role, because those roles are still real in as much as, you know, we're in a relationship, etc. But I think as long as if you're going into the studio with a partner or with someone, just understand each other's roles, respect each other's roles, and just have the same intention. Yeah. And everything else will just happen like it's happening in a company where your boss says.
But did you define them in the beginning, or did they kind of?
I think because we know each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. We just fell.
Yeah, fell into position.
Like I said, there've been other projects. We were doing those weekend projects where I cast kids into like roles. I will write his scripts, then he will take it and then break down the VFX shots and stuff like that. He'll figure out how to film it and all the technical stuff. So it almost happened without saying it. It's almost like, you know, there are benefits to people that sit down and have a formal meeting, but also there are benefits to people who know each other so well that, you know, we don't necessarily have to sit down and have that formal meeting because we have been in practice of this, and no one is looking at a clock like, well, I have another interest here. I mean, we have the same home, same kids, and same everything, that it just kind of means that the number of things that would likely take our energies away, all of our energies are concentrated into one place. And there's no room for ego when you're doing something like this. There have been times where I've had to admit I was wrong. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Later on.
5 years later, it's like there's like one morning you sit on a coffee call, you get your coffee. By the way,
What's wrong?
Yeah, admitting that it's being vulnerable, and that's a very scary thing to do as a human being, to make yourself completely vulnerable to someone.
Yeah, and I think I'm like right now. I think my vulnerability is I'm doing most of the creative work, creative direction, and creative leading. I'm more or less, depending on the scale of the project, kind of carrying some of the projects. But I don't own the company. So AJ owns 100% of the company. I don't have any shares or anything like that. And I think for me, it's kind of like every like man that I talk to, you know, is like, are you crazy? Are you not? So stuff like that. And maybe I'll regret it in the future. But for me, it's kind of my part of saying, you know, my trust, you know, here you go. It's kind of your thing. I'm doing the work. I know that, you know, you probably, you know, if you could, right now we're trying to build the studio to a point that it's self-sustainable in the way that I don't have to do some of the work. Because right now I'm constantly obviously doing most of the creative, and I love doing the work. But as volumes start to crank up, we're going to need to kind of take a shift where I'm absolutely hands-off a particular project. And once that becomes autonomous, it'll get to a point where she doesn't need me because it becomes like autonomous, you know.
you hire people basically.
Yeah, we
you have
hire
other people there doing that.
That's going to be the next step, you know. And as much as right now we're still small, we're still kind of careful about should we get people full-time or should we not. But if we know that we're constantly editing, obviously it's a no-brainer. We're going to have to get an editor. It doesn't really matter because there are multiple projects that they'll be editing. It's the same thing. So I think at some point that's eventually going to happen. And, you know, and I think that independence is going to come with me just saying, yeah, no, I did put the try. I didn't. I mean, she obviously she insisted and started the company anyway, so she deserves to own it. But I haven't at any point like insisted that, well, I would like a little, because what does that communicate? You know, that maybe at some point when I intend to leave you and take 50%, or you know, or what. I don't know if you have any intention to leave me in the future. Do you?
Absolutely not.
Say it to the camera.
This is really becoming a couples council here. Okay.
For me, it's the appreciation of, okay, here's someone reciprocating that trust. Because that is definitely putting someone on a pedestal to say, okay, like I am more than happy to bury my head in the work. Like Seb works 24/7, all for this cause. And I understand that as his wife, this is all for our child. For me, it's like a heightened sense of responsibility that I've been given to then behave like someone who is worthy of that responsibility. Of, okay, this is the work that you have put in, and I can now delegate how that money is spent or how our assets are shared however I see fit. And for me, I think it's so much of what we say, time and time again, we have had like a lot of, oh, well, that's just naive. Like, that's just crazy. Like, you don't do things like that's overly trusting. But, you know, when you choose to build a whole life with one person, you know, you kind of have to start weighing like how much trust are you willing to impart. And the second you hold back, I think the relationship will definitely be affected in some way.
Including the business relationship, basically, to some degree.
In some way, it is definitely going to show. So I think as individuals have never been the type to do anything in halves. We pour. When we decide on something, we pour into it. And so, yeah, lots of times, you know, people will have things to say about some of our decisions as far as the shares or as far as the relationship, but it's worked for us this way.
But I mean, like, it's basically you own the company, but you own the name of the company. There is this kind of like, yeah, exactly. That was your
gesture where he was like, okay, you own the company. What are you going to call it? And I was like, I'm going to name it after you, because our lives prior to our relationship, it's quite interesting when we try and imagine like where we were headed. But we know that by being together, like something special was just bound to come out of it. And we continue to be in that belief. And like I said, you know, a little bit of delusion, you know, helps you, whether that's actually true or maybe like 20 years down the line, like something horrific happens or whatever. But then for the time being, whilst we're here, it's been paying us off. Like us having this fixation of just, this is what we want. This is how we're going to reciprocate each other's efforts. Like it's kept us going. So yeah, it's working out.
So far.
I would love to kind of hear from each of you, like a final comment where you feel like this is something that you would like to share for everyone who's interested to jump ahead in opening their own studio with their partner, with their best friends, with their colleagues they love to work, and they think there is a lot of potential. And what would you basically say as something like as an advice maybe, or an idea or a comment for someone who's thinking, contemplating and watching this, and besides hopefully maybe reaching out to you too as like, hey, what can I do? What did you say? It's like, what would you think of like to advise them or tell them or comment on that?
I'm personally not from the world of, you know, VFX and things like that. But I have used what I have. And I think it's as simple as that for me. I've taken what I have and I found someone who had a need for the things that I possess and my qualities and abilities. And I've been able to shape and mold myself to fit into that puzzle. So being fluid and using what you have is definitely the thing that I've learned. And it's only been 3 years, mind you, of us having this studio. But the progress that we've managed to cover because
it probably doesn't feel like 3 years, basically.
It doesn't feel like 3 years. It feels like no time at all. We blinked and then here we are. But it's just been this idea of just using what you have. That's my bit.
Now I gotta top that. I should have gone first.
I can just cut it out the other way around, and then it will be kind of
I think my philosophy has always been do it.
Just do.
Like, yeah. If I say
So
just
like
do it,
night-
I will sue me. So do it. Right?
this studio ends after this is released.
I think because like when you sometimes, you know, there's the feeling of like just procrastinating and just like feeling like, oh, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be able to do this. You know, even if you're by yourself and you tell yourself, I want to start the studio, and you think about what it's going to take to start that studio, start to take those steps. Like, don't wait. Like, if you, I mean, yesterday, obviously it's just still me and AJ employed in the space. We do our own maintenance, you know, in the space. We do. Yesterday, I was painting the floors and stuff like that. You know,
You witnessed that.
You witnessed that.
We were just, AJ and I were just sitting there chatting, and Seb was like, shoo.
And it's like, you know, it's like, because if you tell yourself that, like, you know, this is going to be a lot of work or whatnot and stuff like that, like, that could have easily been the case, where it's like, I've got so much work to do, like there's many projects pending and stuff like that. But if you just say, let me just do it now, let me do it now, let me not wait. And after we're done painting, my son jumped on the paint. You know, the temptation.
AJ jumped on the paint.
AJ almost jumped on the paint. And you know, the temptation is, we're like, it's gonna dry up, and you know, I paint it all the time anyway and stuff like that. But the right thing to do in that moment is to apply a second coat of paint. And even though you've washed the brushes, you've done, there's like it's kind of, the mind just says, just leave it, you know. But then, you know, there's that third eye that just knows that the thing you should be doing right now that you don't want to do is to just paint the part where there's the little footprint. It wasn't even that bad, you know, and then wash the brushes again and stuff like that. And I think just having that kind of attitude, where when something needs to be done, it just gets done, you will do so much more.
It was such a pleasure to meet you, also being here, interact with you, having time before we have this talk with you, and also seeing you two work in real life, like outside maybe the work environment. And yeah, I can see like I can literally like translate like how you work with your kid, and in you know, going together somewhere out and stuff like that, similar to, because I can see how different you think and still like adjust to each other in a way, basically. And that was really, really interesting to see. And also, I think where you said as the investment in the studio, I mentioned that before, it's like the studio kind of even draw me here to come here, because it felt like there, besides the legitimacy of kind of having something physical, and it's more like trusting, if you want to say, something more, to something bigger than maybe it is. You know, you're still just two people with this huge studio, basically. But it kind of, and also it felt like there's a room for example, for me to come here and be here and record here and stuff like that. It just give this extra touch. But for you, like on the other side, it felt like this huge investment, this, like not only to change this, but also the upcoming costs, like every month and stuff like that. But without it, there would be this kind of missing shift also, like, you know. So I think there is this element where you need to overinvest, and maybe you can, like, you know, go a little bit back when you feel like it doesn't work. But I think this extra step that could be a mistake, like, you know, where you don't know if, like, oh, this whole, like, you know, doing this podcast with so many hours where it's not particularly clear where this is actually going. Like, for example, the income is not going exactly from that, but it still adds the small pieces, and it sometimes takes time to see them as the pieces that they are. Like, you know, like, oh yeah, the studio is maybe not like, you also rent this place, for example, for other people to use it as their own studio. But this is not doing at the moment the exact like zero payment at the end of the day. But then it's like, okay, still the potential is there to do that more. And at the same time, it kind of pays off itself through all the other thing that is maybe not as monetary, but ends up being this, like, I think you mentioned that with the first clients, like, came here and was like, they were more ready to sign, because it was this like, oh yeah, this looks like legit, basically.
It allows people to immediately understand us as people, because who you work with does matter. You know, I think the day and age of like faceless corporations and just handing your money over is kind of over. People quite enjoy having that understanding, that relationship, that hands-on approach of, oh, I know the owners, you know, can you pull me a favor? Or, you know, this has been like a 6-year relationship that we've had with those guys, and they've seen we're very transparent about our story, which is, I think, something that is quite endearing because it's the truth. And you don't always get that when you're just, showing up in a space. If people come here, a crew can expect that I'll cook, I'll feed them, because this is an extension of
And believe
who we
me,
are.
if you were here on one of the shoots, if we're having a shoot and there's like fresh food being made, and usually it's like people on sets tend to like pizza or whatever. And stuff like
Anything
that.
slapdash.
Anything
right?
slapdash.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if there's like fresh food sizzling in the oven and that smell is like filling the room, it's homey, man.
It's like
And that's
home away
really
from
what-
home.
Yeah. It's,
But you're working. And I think that's the feeling that we want to have is the feeling that we offer when people come and visit us. And in as much as Seb was saying that, if there was maybe one thing that he could change, it might be the studio. But I'm sure you're probably thinking about it now. Like,
no, I meant like earlier on, like
in the beginning.
but at the same,
Like you mean like
just
having the studio later
like having
in
the
the
studio-
process?
I definitely think it's an essential part, but I just feel like the pain that we went through in the beginning
We
of the
did.
studio
We
was
went through a
just
lot.
insane.
and I think that's always the risk because I think obviously now.
You never know when, when is exactly the time.
You never know what-
When should I leave a job? When should I do the down payment for something bigger than like that is always the big problem, I think.
That is the hardest part, and maybe the part that people are always less willing to share because the risk is, you share and then what happens after that? Everyone's seen that LinkedIn post that someone sort of sends for that cry for help, and then maybe it doesn't work out, and then now you've exposed yourself, that kind of thing.
Which happened like last few months with the actor strike. Like it
Exactly.
was the whole LinkedIn feed was so full of them, basically.
Help me, it's a very humbling thing, but because between the two of us, we never had to go out to look for that support because it was right here. We were able to rely on each other through those times. And I'm just glad that we came out the other side alive.
That's it with this week's episode of the 21 Artist Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. This podcast is 100% ad-free, and to keep it that way, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find exclusive access to awesome masterclasses and coaching opportunities to work successfully in visual effects, animation, and games. Just go to 21artistshow.com. And don't forget to share it with people who would benefit from that content and tell them they're awesome. See you on the next episode.